Hello everyone. Let's start IGCSE Paper 1 Multiple Choice Score February-March 2025 Variance 12. Let's see what we have in this paper. Question number 1. Substance L takes the shape of the container that holds it. What could be the state of matter of substance L? By the way, option B is incorrect, option C is incorrect, and option D is incorrect because solids have fixed shape. It never takes the shape of its container. So right answer obviously is going to be an A, because when you place the liquid in any container, it will take the shape of that particular container. And so this statement is true for gas also. Okay, so liquid and gases both takes the shape of its container. All right. Question number 2. The melting point and boiling point of pure substances M, N, and O are shown. By the way, remember that these are the pure substances, and pure substances boils and melts at fixed temperature and pressure. Okay, boils at fixed temperature and pressure, freezes at fixed temperature and pressure. So examiner is looking for the substances that are chlorine, ethanol, and sulfur. Which row identifies M, N, and O? By the way, according to my lecture, the boiling point of ethanol is 78 degrees Celsius. Ethanol का formula होता है C2H5OH, and its boiling point is 78 degrees Celsius. That indicates that M is basically ethanol because of its boiling point. So M is ethanol. So M is ethanol. So I believe B is going to be the right answer. But let's check other substances also. By the way, we have sulfur, which has a formula of SA. We have chlorine, which exists in diatomic state. So it has a formula of Cl2. Its mass is 32. Multiply by 8 because we have 8 atoms. So it's going to be how much? 32 times 8 is going to be 256. And chlorine has a mass of 35.5. We have 2 atoms in the molecule, so multiply by 2, it's going to be 71. So according to my lecture, higher the molecular mass, higher the melting and boiling point, which means sulfur has a high melting and boiling point as compared to chlorine. That indicates this is going to be sulfur. And this O is going to be chlorine. So O is chlorine, N is sulfur. So right answer obviously is going to be B. Question number 3. Which statement explains why noble gases are unreactive? That's what we have done so many times. Noble gases are reactive because they have stable octet in the valence shell. Because they have stable octet or duplet rule in the valence shell. Octet rule means 8 electrons in the valence shell. Duplet rule means 2 electrons in the valence shell, which means the outer shell is complete. All right. So they are in the same group of the periodic table. That's true. They are in the same group of the periodic table, but that doesn't reflect the reason of this unreactivity. All right, which is why A is absolutely incorrect. They are gases at room temperature. That's also true. But this statement doesn't reflect the reason for this unreactivity. Obviously, option B is incorrect. They each have a full outer shell electron. That's true. And that's the reason of the reactivity also. And therefore, C is going to be the right answer. Let's talk about D. They are found in the air. Not all of the noble gases are found in the air. Obviously, only argon gas is found in the air, right? So this statement is wrong, and obviously D is also wrong. By the way, they have full outer shell configuration, or they follow octet or duplet rule is the same thing. What is the electronic configuration of phosphidine? By the way, this is phosphorus, which has a positive negative charge, so it's phosphidine. Now, phosphorus has an atomic number of 15. 3 minus charge means it has total 18 electrons. Let me write the electronic configuration of phosphidine. First shell contain 2, second shell contain 8, third shell contain 8, and therefore total 18 electrons, and therefore D is going to be the right answer. Okay. Next question, question number 5. Some information about 4 metal atoms or ions is shown. Either they are metal atoms or either they are ions. Okay. Which 2 atoms or ions are from the isotope of the same element? Now, definition of isotope is basically they have same number of protons and electrons but different number of neutrons. And same element के होने चाहिए. तो अगर same element हैं तो obviously they carries same charge also. तो same charge देखिए कहां पर है, ये same charge है. इसका मतलब R and S are the isotopes of the same element because both of them have same number of proton number but different number of electrons. All right, so same number of protons and different number of neutron. So I believe R and S is going to be the right answer because R and S have same charge, which means they are found in the, which means they are the isotopes of the same element, and therefore they have same proton number but different nuclear number. And that's the definition of isotope. I hope it makes sense to you. That's an easy thing. Which row describe the changes to the atoms when a metal and a non-metal react together? By the way, when a metal and a non-metal react together, then always ionic bond is formed. And during the formation of an ionic bond, metal always loses electron and form cation, which is also called positively charged ion, whereas non-metals gain electron and forms anions. All right, so metal atom never gain electrons, it always loses electrons. Non-metal atom never loses electron, always gain electrons. Okay, so when they loses electrons, obviously they cannot form anions. Metal cannot forms anions. Metal always forms cations. Non-metal, when gain electrons, they cannot form anions. They always form anions, which is why D is going to be the right answer. Okay, that's a very basic piece of information. In the following diagram, X and Y are atoms of the different elements. Which diagram correctly shows the arrangement of outer shell electrons? So examiner is looking for the valence shell electrons in a molecule of methane. Methane has a formula of CH4. We have done this valence shell dot and cross diagram in the class. So this is carbon. It has 4 hydrogen atoms. ये आपके first, ये आपका second, third, and this one is 4th. ये हाइड्रोजन है आपका, hydrogen. This is also hydrogen. This is also hydrogen. Carbon has 6 valence. Oh, sorry. Carbon is found in group 14 of the periodic table. My bad. It's not group 14. It's group 4. Group 4 of the periodic table, which means it has 4 valence electrons. That means these electrons are represented by dot. So these are the 4 valence electrons of carbon. Now hydrogen is found in group 1 of the periodic table, which means it has 1 valence electron. And this electron is represented by cross. So on the basis of this entire analysis, D is going to be the right answer, okay? By the way, this option is incorrect because hydrogen has only 1 valence electron. Carbon has 4 valence electrons, whereas it shows 6 valence electrons, which is why it's also incorrect. Carbon shows 4 valence electrons. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and this one is 5. So it's also wrong. Okay. That's question number 7, guys. Let's move on to the next question. Question number 8. Which pathway describe the properties of graphite? Graphite, certain points you need to remember, which we have done in the class. The first one is it has a giant structure. Second thing, contain covalent bond. Third, can conduct electricity because of the presence of delocalized electron. And therefore it is used as an electrode in the electrolysis, right? Last, high melting and boiling point. Let's see इस chart में क्या है. What we have, what's given in this chart. It is covalently bonded. Yes. Conduct. Does it conduct electricity when solid? Yes. And therefore A is going to be the right answer. Okay. That was easy. Which row identifies the formula and the name of the substance? Cobalt 2 chloride has a formula of COCl2. Examiner has given CuCl2, which is wrong. Ethane has a formula of C2H6, that's true. Helium always exists in monatomic state. So its formula is wrong, which is why option C is also wrong. Iron 3 oxide is basically Fe2O3, so formula is wrong, which is why option is wrong. Okay. So right answer obviously is going to be B. Question 10. Antifreeze contain a mixture of water and ethylene glycol. The diagram shows their displayed formula. Ouch. Water. Okay. What is the molecular formula of ethylene glycol? By the way, ये formula तो water का है. तो इसका मतलब ये तीनों के तीनों structure ethylene glycol के हैं. So which means these three structures belongs to ethylene glycol, right? So let me take out the number of carbon and hydrogen and oxygen atom from this. How many carbon atoms? 2. How many hydrogen atoms? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And how many oxygen atom? 2. So its formula is C2H6O2. This formula is given in option B, which is why B is going to be the right answer. Okay. One more thing. It's not given in the question, but you should remember antifreeze is always used in car radiators. Okay. All right. Question number 11. The equation for the reaction of magnesium with oxygen is shown In an experiment, 6 grams of magnesium is reacted with excess oxygen. Which mass of magnesium oxide is produced? Since mass of magnesium is given, which means we can find the moles of magnesium. So moles of magnesium is basically 6 divided by 24. 24 is the relative atomic mass of magnesium. So 6 divided by 24 is going to be 0.25 moles. Now look at the board. Look at this equation. It has 2 mole. It has also 2 moles, which means both of them have a similar molar ratio, right? So moles of magnesium is always equals to moles of magnesium oxide, right? Because they have the similar molar ratio, which is why if we have 0.25 moles of magnesium, obviously it's going to be the same for magnesium oxide. Now we need to find out the mass of magnesium oxide, and for that we need to multiply moles with the MR of magnesium oxide, and MR of magnesium oxide is how much? 24 plus 16 becomes 40. So 40 into 0.25 becomes 10 gram, and so A is the right answer. Which products are formed when dilute sulfuric acid undergoes electrolysis? That's what we have done in the class. My goodness. We have 3 different ions in dilute sulfuric acid. Hydrogen ion discharge at cathode in the form of hydrogen gas. And hydroxide ions discharge at anode in the form of oxygen gas, which means hydrogen gas is given off at cathode and oxygen gas is given off at anode, and therefore A is going to be the right answer. Question 13. The diagram shows an experiment to electroplate a nickel spoon with silver. We need to do electroplating, which means this nickel spoon has to be the cathode. This silver needs to be anode. And obviously this electrolyte needs to be silver nitrate. Okay. So positive electrode is anode. Negative electrode is cathode. Anode is made up of silver. Ouch. Yeah, anode is made up of silver. Negative electrode needs to be nickel spoon. Electrolyte needs to be silver nitrate. So right answer obviously is going to be D. Okay. So examiner in this question was looking for the positive electrode, the negative electrode, and the electrolyte. That's easy. That's what we have done. Okay. I hope it makes sense to you. These are the very easy. These questions are really, really easy, you know. These are very straightforward questions. Let's move on to the question number 14. When dilute sulfuric acid reacts with aqueous sodium hydroxide. Okay. Let me write the equation first. This is NaOH. It is reacting with sulfuric acid. According to my lecture, whenever NaOH and H2SO4 react together, always sodium sulfate, which is your salt, and water is formed. Since we have 2 sodium here, so in order to balance the equation, we need to put 2 here. And in order to balance the number of hydrogen, we need to put here. All right. This is basically your acid. And this is basically your alkali. So technically, it is a neutralization reaction. because whenever neutralization reaction takes place, always salt and water is formed, number one, and neutralization according to my lecture is an exothermic reaction. So whenever neutralization reaction takes place, energy is given out, and when energy is given out, the temperature of the reaction mixture rises. So examiner is saying the temperature of the solution increases. So this point proves which words describe this reaction. Obviously, it is exothermic. Neutralization is fine, but it is not endo, which is why option A is incorrect. Acid-base reaction or neutralization reaction is never redox reaction. It is not endothermic either, which is why B is incorrect. It is exothermic, it is neutralization, and so C is going to be the right answer, okay? In option D, exothermic is fine, but acid-base is not redox, which is why option D is also incorrect. My God, question number 15 is my favorite question. Which statement is correct for both physical and chemical change? Let me give you an example here. For physical change, this is ice. It is solid at room temperature and pressure. On melting, it will turn to water, which is liquid. Look at this. The MR of H2O in ice is 18. The MR of water is 18. So mass will remain same. Only state changes. One more thing. Mass and chemical formula remain same. Only state changes in physical property. All right. Let's talk about the chemical change. By the way, that was the physical change. Let's talk about the chemical change. And for chemical change, let me give you an example here. This is calcium carbonate. If you provide heat, it undergoes thermal decomposition and will turn to calcium oxide and carbon dioxide. Look at this. New substances are formed, which is why it is a chemical change. But what's so important in that? Look very carefully. The the molecular mass of calcium carbonate is 100 gram. The MR of calcium oxide is 56 gram. The MR of carbon dioxide is 44 gram. See, if you add these two masses, technically you will get 100 gram, right? So the mass of reactant and the mass of product is same even in chemical change. Similarly, the mass of reactant and the mass of product in physical change is also same. So amount or mass both in chemical and physical changes is gonna be same, right? Sorry. So before reaction it is 18, after reaction is 18, so mass remains same. Before reaction is 100 and after reaction overall becomes 100. So before reaction and after reaction the mass is still the same, and therefore on the basis of that B is going to be the right answer. That's a very very interesting point. आप चाहो तो कोई और एग्जांपल मुझसे ले सकते हो, मैं एक और एग्जांपल देके दिखाता हूं आपको. Hold on a second, I'll give you another example in that. This is basically NaOH and this is basically HCl. It is an acid base reaction again. It is converting into sodium chloride and water. The MR of sodium hydroxide is 40. The MR of HCl is 36.5. The MR of sodium chloride is 58.5. The MR of water is 18. Let me calculate the mass of reactant before reaction and mass of product after the reaction. So 40 plus 36.5 becomes 76.5. And 58.5 plus 18 is basically 76.5. Have you seen that? Reaction, the mass before the reaction is 76.5. After the reaction, the mass remains same. And therefore, the total mass of the substances is the same before and after the change, which is why B is going to be the right answer. I've given you 3 examples, all right? 1 for physical and 2 for chemical. I hope it makes sense to you. A sample of calcium carbonate reacts with dilute hydrochloric acid to produce a final volume of 60 cm cube of gas. Calcium carbonate has a formula of CaCO3 reacting with hydrochloric acid, converting into salt, which is calcium chloride, water, and carbon dioxide. So the amount of carbon dioxide collected in this experiment is 60 cm cube. The reaction finishes after 120 seconds. Okay. The experiment is repeated at a lower temperature. That's a very straightforward point. If temperature is lower, kinetic energy also decreases. If kinetic energy also decreases, collision frequency decreases. If collision frequency decreases, rate of reaction decreases. If rate of reaction decreases, then it means more time to complete the reaction. If it takes more time to complete the reaction, which means time has to be greater than 120 seconds. So if it is greater than 120 seconds, so it's going to be 160, obviously. So time for reaction to finish is going to be more than 120 seconds. So it has to be 160 around, okay? Now, final volume of the gaseous product will remain 60. Why? Because all other conditions stays the same. So volume is same. Volume is same. Because all other conditions are same. On the basis of that, D is going to be the right answer. In which equation is iron oxidized? Iron oxidized meaning increase in oxidation state. In option A, iron has an oxidation state of +2 in this compound, whereas in this, iron is found in the elemental form, which is why it is 0. So it is +2 to 0. +2 to 0 means decrease in oxidation state, and decrease in oxidation state is basically reduction. An examiner is looking for the oxidation, which is why A is incorrect. In Fe2O3, the oxidation state of iron is 3+. Over here, it is 0. Again, it is +3 to 0. That means it is also a decrease in oxidation state. My goodness. Decrease in oxidation state. And therefore, it is also wrong. In this compound, iron has an oxidation state of 3+. In this compound, iron has an oxidation state of 2+. So it's +3 to +2. Again, decrease in oxidation state. So again, it is wrong. If A, B, C wrong, obviously correct option is going to be D. Why D is correct? Because here the oxidation state of iron is 0. Here the oxidation state of iron is +2. So it's basically 0 to +2. And that indicates the increase in oxidation state. And that's your answer. That's question number 17. Let's talk about question number 18, guys. HOCl is an acid. By the way, you need to remember this the name of this acid. It's called chloric 1 acid. And 1 in this bracket indicates that chlorine has an oxidation state of +1 in this molecule. Ammonium hydroxide is an alkali. If chloric 1 acid is an acid, it donates hydrogen ion in aqueous medium. If ammonium hydroxide is an alkali, obviously it donates hydroxide ions in aqueous medium. Let's see, examiner is looking for what? Which row shows the ions present in aqueous solution and identify the acid and the alkali. Acid always shows H plus ions and alkali shows OH negative ions. On the basis of that, B is going to be the right answer. That's an easy thing. Which element forms an oxide that reacts with water to produce a blue solution with thymolphthalene? Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Blue solution with thymolphthalene indicates it is an alkali, because alkali shows blue color of thymolphthalene. Or in other words, you can say thymolphthalene shows blue color whenever we have an alkaline solution. So which element shows alkaline? Which element shows oxide? So calcium forms calcium oxide, and you placed it in water, it will turn to calcium hydroxide, and it's your alkali. And this alkali shows blue color of thymolphthalene, right? Carbon is insoluble in water, cannot react. In fact, carbon is used to improve the taste of the water, right? So it's not gonna react. So it's option 2 is incorrect. Sulfur, oh my goodness, hold on. Let me give you another explanation. The oxide of carbon is carbon dioxide, and when carbon dioxide is placed in water, it will turn to an acid, which is H2CO3. So that's your acid. That's not an alkali. The oxide of sulfur is sulfur dioxide. When you add it in water, it will turn to H2SO4, which is H2SO3, which is your sulfurous acid. So obviously second and third both are incorrect, because both of them give acidic solution. And in acid solution, thymolphthalene shows colorless, whereas examiner is showing blue, which means only first option is correct, and therefore B is going to be the right answer. Question 20. A sample of fertilizer is tested by warming it with aqueous sodium hydroxide. Okay. So whenever a fertilizer is warmed with aqueous sodium hydroxide, a colorless gas is produced. This must be ammonia gas, because this gas turns damp red litmus paper blue. So this confirms that ammonia gas is produced. Okay. Which element is essential for plant growth must be present? So this fertilizer must be ammonium salt. Because whenever any ammonium salt react with any alkali, always ammonia gas is produced, which turns damp red litmus paper blue. And in ammonium salt, we have nitrogen atom, and that nitrogen is essential for plant growth. Okay. Question 21. Insoluble solid, magnesium carbonate. By the way, magnesium carbonate is insoluble solid, insoluble in water. That's a very powerful statement. Reacts with dilute sulfuric acid. So when magnesium carbonate, sulfuric acid are reacting together, magnesium sulfate, water, and carbon dioxide gas is given off. The steps used to make crystals of magnesium sulfate are listed. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. So first, Hold on. Step 1. Oh, the steps are already given. Add excess magnesium carbonate to dilute sulfuric acid. True. And stir the mixture. True. Filter the mixture. True. So when you filter the mixture, what you will get? You will get two things. The first one is filtrate. And filtrate is basically belongs to magnesium sulfate and a residue. And residue belongs to magnesium carbonate because it is insoluble in water, right? So it will collect it in the conical flask. It will trap on the filter paper. Okay. Now the third is after filtration, we need to filtrate to the point of crystallization, then leave the filtrate to cool, and so you will get the crystals of magnesium sulfate. What is the residue removed from the mixture in step 2? Residue. Which residue removed from the mixture? Magnesium carbonate. So right answer is A. Okay, that's easy. Which trend occurs across the period from sodium to argon? By the way, sodium, magnesium, aluminum, silicon, phosphorus, sulfur, chlorine, and argon. These are the metals, and these are the non-metals. Which means these metals conduct electricity because of the presence of free mobile electrons. These non-metals cannot conduct electricity because of the absence of free mobile electrons. Okay. A change from metal to non-metal, that's true. Metal to non-metal change हो रहा है. So option A could be the right answer, but we need to discuss other options also. An increase in the melting point, no. It is a gas at RTP. It is a gas at RTP. So gases have a low melting and boiling point. So obviously option B is incorrect. More violent reaction with water. Obviously argon is chemically inert, cannot react with water. So this option is incorrect. Increases the electrical conductivity. By the way, metals do conduct electricity. They cannot, which means electrical conductivity decreases across the period. So this option is incorrect. Obviously A is going to be the right answer. God, this is too much. Right? Okay. 23. Which statement about the element bromine is correct? By the way, bromine is found in group 7 of the periodic table. And all group 7 elements always exist in diatomic state, which is represented by generally X2. It displaces chlorine from aqueous potassium chloride. By the way, both chlorine and chloride have same reactivity, so reaction cannot take place. Oh no! Oh my bad, my bad. Look. This is bromine, and it is less reactive than chlorine. Obviously, bromine cannot displace chloride into chlorine from its salt. Obviously, option A is incorrect. Bromine has a higher density than chlorine. That's true, because the molecular mass of chlorine is 71 and the molecular mass of bromine is 160. So higher the mass, higher the density. You know that, right? Lower the mass, lower the density. So option B could be the right answer, but let's talk about other. Diatomic metal. Diatomic metal. By the way, it is not metal, it is non-metal. It is a green gas at room temperature. Bromine is not a gas, it is a liquid. Also, it is not green, it is red brown, which is why D is incorrect, and therefore B is going to be the correct answer. Metallic element X has a high density. If it has a high density, obviously Metallic element X belongs to transition element. Because transition elements have high melting and boiling point, have high density, shows colored compounds. So obviously C is going to be the right answer. Okay. Again, that's a very straightforward question. Let's move on to the question number 25. Which statement about the uses of metals is correct? Aluminum has a low density, that's true, and a good electrical conductivity, that's also true, which makes it suitable for overhead electrical cable, that's also true. I believe A is going to be the right answer. Aluminum food containers can only be used for a short time because chemical in the food reacts with aluminum. But food cannot react with aluminum. Okay, so cannot. Right answer is again A. Next is electrical wiring made from copper is covered with plastic because copper corrodes easily. Copper cannot corrode because the reactivity of copper is very low. So that's not the valid reason. Copper is used in the manufacture of aircraft. Copper cannot used in the manufacture of aircraft. Aluminum is used. All right. And also it is not malleable. It is malleable, guys. All metals are malleable and ductile. So right answer obviously is A. Question 26. Steel bridges are painted to help stop rust from forming their surfaces. What causes a steel to rust? Rusting triggers because of three basic components. The first one is oxygen in air. The second one is moisture, that is water. And the third one is salt. So examiner has given oxygen and water, but no sunlight, which is why option A is incorrect. Water and oxygen only, that's correct. Water and sunlight, water is correct, sunlight is not correct. Option C is again incorrect. Sunlight is not correct, oxygen is correct, option D is incorrect, and therefore B is going to be the right answer. All right, so among these three components, examiner has given two, water and oxygen, which is why B is going to be the right answer. Okay, which two metals are mixed together to make brass? Brass is an alloy. An alloy is a mixture of metal. So brass is made up of copper and zinc. Zinc and copper, 2 and 4. And therefore D is going to be the right answer. Question 28. Metal M is between zinc and iron. इसका मतलब metal M is between zinc and iron in the reactivity series. इसका मतलब metal M is more reactive than iron and less reactive than zinc. This is going to be the case. Zinc, metal M, and iron. That indicates it is more reactive than iron, but less reactive than zinc. Right? Which statement about metal M are correct? Oh. It reacts with cold water to produce hydrogen gas. If M is less reactive than iron, which means cannot react with cold water. Okay. Because if magnesium reacts with steam rapidly, which means this M reacts rapidly with the steam also because of its less reactivity, right? So because of its less reactivity, obviously it cannot react with cold water, just like magnesium. Magnesium also cannot react. Magnesium reacts with cold water very slowly because of its less reactivity. Since M is even more less reactive than magnesium, which is why it cannot react with cold water. It does not react with cold water, that's true. but will react with dilute hydrochloric acid. That's true. Since iron can react with hydrochloric acid, zinc can react with hydrochloric acid, which means metal M can also react with hydrochloric acid. The second statement is correct because metal M is more reactive than hydrogen, which means it can also react with acid. आप इस तरह से भी सोच सकते हैं बात को. Next, the metal can be obtained from its oxide by heating it strongly with carbon. That's true. That's true. That's true because the the lower the metal found in the reactivity series, the easier uh, it is obtained from its oxide by a reduction with carbon, right? That's what we have done in the reactivity series chapter. So I can get this metal from its oxide when it is heated with carbon. The metal oxide cannot be reduced, can be reduced, can be reduced, can be reduced. So the second and third statement is correct, and therefore C is going to be the right answer. Okay. I repeat again, those metals which are lower in the reactivity series, if we make oxides of those metals, they can easily reduce with the carbon atom on heating, right? Just remember that. Metals which are higher up in the reactivity series, their oxides cannot reduce with carbon. Question 29. What is the color change when water is added to anhydrous copper sulfate? This is anhydrous copper sulfate, which is white. When you add water in it, it will turn to hydrated copper sulfate, which is CuSO4.5H2O. And obviously its color is blue. So white to blue. So white to blue is basically D. D is going to be the right answer. Question 30. Which statement about composition of clean dry air is correct? It contains 78% oxygen. No, it contains 78% nitrogen. So that's option incorrect. It contained 21% nitrogen. No, it contained 21% oxygen. That's also incorrect. It contained 4% of carbon dioxide. That's incorrect. It contained less than 1% argon. That's correct. 1% argon, according to my lecture, and 0.1% something about carbon dioxide. So C is going to be the right answer. Okay. Which row identifies a source or an adverse effect of methane? Methane causes global warming. And that changes the climate, right? Source. Methane is obtained through decomposition of vegetation. We have discussed this in atmospheric and pollution ka chapter, right? So D is going to be the right answer. By the way, methane never obtained from car engine. Never, ever. Question number 32. Which statements about alkenes are correct? Examiner is looking for alkene. So propene is an alkene, and all alkenes are saturated hydrocarbon? No. Unsaturated hydrocarbon? That's incorrect. Ethene is made by heating long chain alkane to a high temperature in the presence of a catalyst. That's true. When a long chain hydrocarbon is converted into an alkene using these conditions, obviously this process is going to be cracking. So cracking ke through we can get ethene. Hexene reacts with aqueous bromine, changing its color from colorless to orange. Hexene reacts with aqueous bromine. That's true. Changing its color from colorless to orange. That's incorrect. That's technically orange to colorless or red brown to colorless. Ethene, propene, and butene have the same general formula. That's true because um, they are because they are belong to same homologous series. And if they belong to the same homologous series, which means they have the same general formula. So second and fourth is correct, and therefore D is going to be the right answer. Question 33. The table shows the formula and name of some organic compound. That's called chloro. Let me write it down. That's chloromethane because we have only one carbon. He's saying chloroethane, which means incorrect. This is ethanoic acid. That's right. This is 1,2-dibromoethane. That's true. This is calcium ethanoate, and that's incorrect. We have done this calcium ethanoate in the class. So which row gives the correct name for the formula shown? Okay. Second and third is basically the right answer because second or third में नाम और formula बिल्कुल correct दिए हुए हैं. And we have done both in the class. We have done, in fact, these three in the class. Which gas is the main constituent of natural gas? Natural gas is basically methane. And methane has a formula of CH4, which means C is going to be the right answer. My goodness. 35. A sample of petroleum is separated into three fractions, X, Y, and Z, using distillation, fractional distillation. Some properties of X, Y, and Z are listed. X is more viscous than Z. That means X has more mass. If X has more mass, then it means X. Okay, X has more mass. Okay, conclusion पे jump नहीं करते. Okay, पढ़ लेते हैं. X is more viscous than Z. Y has a higher boiling point than X. If Y has a higher boiling point, then Y has a long carbon chain. Long carbon chain. Because the higher the carbon chain, the longer the carbon chain, the higher the molecular mass, the higher the molecular mass, the higher the boiling point, okay? So Y has a long carbon chain. So Y has a long carbon chain. And the next statement is most volatile. If X is more viscous than Z, then it means X is less volatile. And Z is more volatile. In other words, so Z is more volatile, right? So right answer obviously is going to be B. If X is more viscous, which means X has more density. If X has more density, obviously denser substances cannot evaporate at RTP. And which is why Z is more volatile because it can easily evaporate at RTP, okay? Oh my goodness. 36. Two salts, solution P and Q are tested. The table shows the result. What are P and Q? Okay. First of all, few drops of aqueous NaOH is added. Green precipitates are formed. These green precipitates represents Rn2 ions. A few drops of dilute nitric acid and few drops of barium nitrate are added. No changes seen. So when you add barium nitrate and no changes seen, then it means sulfate absent. When you add dilute nitric acid via silver nitrate solution, white precipitates forms. then it means chloride ions is present. Now we have Fe2 plus ions and we have chloride ions. So whenever these two combines together after cross multiplication, you will get FeCl2. And FeCl2 is basically iron 2 chloride, right? Iron 2 chloride has only one option, which means A is going to be the answer. But let me confirm Q, okay? Red-brown precipitates form, that indicates Fe3 plus. White precipitates form when we add barium nitrate, that indicates sulfate ions. No change is seen, halide ions absent. I mean to say chloride, bromide, iodide absent. Now we have Fe3 plus, we have sulfate ions. Since charges are different, they will cross multiply with each other. And you will get Fe2SO4 taken 3. So this compound is iron 3 sulfate. And this compound is iron 2 chloride. So iron 3 sulfate is A, iron 3 sulfate is this. So right answer obviously is going to be an A. 37. A small quantity of solid E is added to large excess of aqueous ethanoic acid. No bubbles of gas are seen. If no bubbles of gas are seen, then it means this option and this option both are incorrect, because when magnesium treated with ethanoic acid gives hydrogen gas. If sodium carbonate is treated with ethanoic acid, it gives carbon dioxide gas. Since examiner has given instructions clearly that no gas is given off, which means it cannot be magnesium or sodium carbonate, because both of them give gases, right? Solid dissolves, all right, to give a colorless solution. Another very important aspect, give a colorless solution. So obviously option B is also incorrect, because whenever it reacts with acid, it will turn to sodium ethanoate. And this, not sodium ethanoate, hold on. It gives copper ethanoate. And copper ethanoate gives blue color. All right, so obviously answer is going to be A. Why A is correct? Let me explain you. And we have done this in class. Ethanoic acid is basically a weak organic acid. Calcium hydroxide is an alkali. So technically it is a neutralization reaction. And so you will get calcium ethanoate and water. How many ethanoate we have in the formula? 2. So to balance the equation, we need to put 2 here. To balance the number of hydrogen atoms, we need to put 2 here. Okay. So this is going to be your salt and water. And obviously, you will get the colorless solution of these two substances. Okay. My goodness, 38. Ethanol is manufactured by 2 different processes. First is fermentation of glucose, and the second is hydration of ethene. Which raw material are used by the 2 processes to make ethanol? In the fermentation, I need glucose. In the hydration of ethene, I need ethene and steam. So 1, 3, and 4. Right answer is going to be B. That's a very straightforward question, guys. If you remember such a stuff, you don't need any sort of working here. 39. What is used to test for chlorine? Chlorine bleaches damp blue litmus paper, and therefore B is going to be the right answer. That's a fact. Question number 40, that's the last question, which is statement about paper chromatography is correct. It can show if substance is pure. That's true. And that's the answer, because chromatography is used for the purity of the substance, is used to check the purity of the substance. So it can separate a mixture of insoluble substances, no soluble substances. It can separate a compound into its elements? Never. It provides a way of combining substances to make new colored compounds? Never, not at all. All of them are incorrect. So right answer is going to be B, A, and that's a fact also. Guys, we have done this question in previous years also. We have done this question in the class also. Thank you very much, everyone. Hope it makes sense to you.